YouTube, unlike what the title, thumbnail, and timing of this video's release will have you believe, this video will not be for kids. What's up, y'all? Another End Offender back here with a kinda rushed video today. With the release of Toy Story 5, provided I finish this video at the exact right time and that it clears copyright problems by then, now having arrived, I would like to take this time to heap some praise upon the very installment that was the original intended ending.
Ending up at a landfill and then ultimately heading towards the belching inferno of an incinerator, that's the end. That is the end. There's nothing beyond that. And that really resonated with me and stuck with me, and I couldn't let go of it. And I thought, if we're going to end this trilogy in a big way and really push the toys to the brink, I thought that we should take them to the dump.
And should have absolutely stayed that way, Toy Story 3. If you just want to jump straight into my rebuttal of YMS's video, feel free to use this timestamp to skip this entire introduction. Despite being adjusted for inflation, Pixar's highest grossing entry in the Toy Story saga as of writing the script, and despite having won great reviews, accolades, and even a Best Picture nomination, the internet discourse surrounding this movie hasn't always been rainbows and sunshine. And much of these criticisms, ranging from alleged plot holes to perceived world-building problems, even going as far as to call into question whether 3 is a shameless rehash of prior entries, can originate from one very popular, stereotypically cynical YouTuber. Now, before the comments roll in, allow me a disclaimer. First of all, this response to Your Movie Sucks Toy Story 3 review from 2011 is not intended in any way to be a personal attack on the channel's creator, Adam Johnston. In fact, I do hold respect for some of the content he has created, particularly anything to do with his videos on The Lion King. What this is intended to be is a respectful, yet direct and detailed critique of his review from 2011, calling out the embarrassingly inaccurate points he has made, of which there are many. Second, on that note, I know I'm not the first user to have debunked his points made throughout the video. When Gaming Magic 13 published his Toy Story 3 series last year, he analyzed the movie in chronological order, only occasionally rebutting criticisms made by YMS and other people who would agree with the points he made when they fell in order of the movie's chain of events. Furthermore, he expressed disinterest in calling out anybody directly, instead choosing to focus first and foremost on the criticisms themselves, so to support the thesis made of how tightly written Toy Story 3's script is. Though I've chosen to do a point-by-point rebuttal for anyone who solely wants a response as to why his points don't hold up, and doesn't want to have to extensively search through or jump across GM13's lengthy video series, as in-depth and polished as they may be, to find them. And though I will occasionally defer to points he made in his love letter series, I ensure to stay away from directly ripping quotes from those when writing this video, so to avoid resembling plagiarism when taking notes for YMS's review. Finally, just like Gaming Magic 13 disclaimed in his own series, just because I will be making an in-depth rebuttal for YMS does not give anybody the right to harass him under any circumstances, so please do not spam him on YouTube, Twitter, or anywhere else after having watched this video. Anyways, enough introduction, let's just get on with the Toy Story 3 defense video, shall we? YMS chooses to spend the first 5 minutes on reviewing the first 2 movies of the Toy Story trilogy. If you just want to skip straight to his points about the third, please skip to this timestamp here. Your Movie Sucks starts with some off-topic skit about technical difficulties or whatever with the audio only coming out the left side of my headset for a lot of it. That'll be an especially irritating writing problem throughout the video. Goes on for 1 minute.
Should it have gotten nominated for Best Picture? Hell no. This is not a good screenplay at all.
As you will see throughout this review, the screenplay by Michael Arndt for Toy Story 3 is far better than YMS will give it credit for. Ironically, it'll be the plot holes he tries to poke through the movie script that'll make less sense than the movie itself. Almost like this should have been a Toy Story 4 review instead. One skit with a Pixar hater later, at 2 minutes and 8 seconds, come unsupported claims from YMS that Pixar is overrated because it has a
false immunity.
And people like Pixar movies because
it says Pixar on it.
Did they take a page out of the Daily Bugle regarding basic smear tactics? Also, happy 20 years to Cars. Also better than its reputation by people like YMS suggests. Go watch after this video. Have fun. YMS then goes on to describe the technical limitations of Toy Story and how it came out at the right time to revolutionize 3D animation with character models more simplistic than humans in the form of toys. Apt observations so far. But then he goes on to say,
The movie does have a couple flaws, though. Like how Buzz doesn't believe he's a toy, he believes he's a space ranger, so why does he pretend to be a toy whenever Andy comes in the room?
well, have a listen to this line of dialogue.
Let me show you something. It looks as though I've been accepted into your culture. Your chief, Andy, inscribed his name on me.
Though the immediate effect of the scene is supposed to drive Woody to the breaking point of his mounting jealousy of Buzz becoming Andy's new favorite toy, with Buzz now being the only other toy with Andy's name written on the bottom of his boot, it also serves as an explanation for why Buzz freezes. Though he believes he's crash landed on a strange planet and needs to repair his ship, he also wants to be respectful of the culture of various different species, i.e. toys, that inhabit the strange planet, i.e. Andy's room. And the only rule the toys absolutely have to follow is to freeze whenever Andy or any other family member of his enters the room, so to avoid scarring the kid for life at best or completely shattering the fabric of the toy's secrecy and inner world at worst. And whilst he still believes that he's a space ranger, he doesn't freeze in front of other humans, whether it be his decision to stow away at the passenger seat of the pizza truck where the driver's vision of that seat is blocked, taking cover under empty boxes of food to enter a secure airlock, sprinting out in the open to board a spaceship at Pizza Planet, Woody having told him to freeze in the presence of Sid's hand, obviously having also told him to do so when Sid went to the claw machine, and Buzz, upon when he realizes he's a toy, now understanding why he needs to freeze in front of other humans like Hannah. So no, not a plot hole at all for why Buzz freezes whenever Andy or his family enter the room.
It's never really addressed.
True, the film series could have used a couple additional lines of dialogue or so to piece together their world-building rules more clearly, but the pieces for Buzz's freezing are there, as opposed to, oh, I don't know, an arts and crafts creation by a literal kindergartner that outright declares that it is not a toy that inexplicably comes to life and even more inexplicably tries to throw itself away, and most inexplicably of all is only stopped by humans entering the room that it has no care whatsoever for and hence has no reason to freeze in front of them. Anyways, I digress. Different topic already been covered. Go watch, have fun. After some less significant gripes about Toy Story, which I won't address for the sake of brevity, YMS moves on to Toy Story 2, addressing how it expanded upon the lore, world building, and themes of the first movie.
They explain the origin and backstory of both Woody and Buzz, helping us to understand what type of toys they were meant to be marketed as.
This is correct. YMS then moves on to claim that Jessie could have seen the prospector turn on the TV unless she was sleeping with her eyes open. What he fails to address that it was most likely Al waking up that woke Jessie up with a much more audible sound than the TV turning on. The 3-second gap that would have been enough time for him to slink his pickaxe needed to turn on the TV out of Jessie's line of sight, and the sound of Al waking up being enough to muffle the sound of him re-entering his box before she reawakes and immediately freezes. All whilst Al, with his glasses lopsided in his delirious state, not noticing the movement of any of the toys. A less relevant plot hole than the Buzz freezing one that I went over earlier, but it annoyed me nonetheless. Finally, after some edgy joke about Andy jacking off for whatever, YMS gets to the plot of Toy Story 3, 5 minutes into his 13-minute review. He begins by remarking that
all of the plot devices are just plot conveniences.
And then he jumps into his dissection right at the beginning.
Why the hell would the attic close by itself? Oh, so the toys never make it up to the attic and Andy's mom thinks it's trash?
Because it was clearly shown to be a rickety old mechanism that required a human to be on the ladder to be held in place, as is evidenced by it starting to close back up for a split second before Andy hops on. Inconvenient that it closed itself back up, but not impossible, and it serves as something to kickstart the story as opposed to a lazy writing mechanic to get characters out of trouble.
Why are they moving around to the other side of the... Oh, so Andy's mom can close the door and then they can get driven to the daycare?
Because the dialogue of the scene is clearly trying to convey Woody is not having it with the toys abandoning Andy for daycare, and thus trying to push the box out of the car by himself from the other side. And Buzz follows him, acting as a sort of mediator for the entire Woody v. Andy's Toys case.
Come on, Buzz, give me a hand. We gotta get this thing.
Woody, wait. We need to figure out what's best for everyone.
This is just a big nostalgia fest where they try to trigger emotions by raping your childhood.
Hey, where have I heard that crude phrase before?
Isn't there a song, George Raped My Childhood?
George Lucas raped our childhood. George Lucas raped our childhood. George Lucas.
Shut up! Just shut up, you idiot!
Yeah, well, we all know now how that turned out. But let's see how this is all some big fat nostalgia bait ride. Why don't we, YMS? YMS tries to compare the toys not believing Woody in the first movie to not believing him in the third movie, that they should believe him because
He's been right the past, I don't know, 15 years. What reason could Woody possibly have for lying to you about this?
well, allow me to direct you to the documented screenwriting process of this movie for why the toys think Woody is denying reality to them. When Michael Arndt wrote the screenplay for Toy Story 3 in collaboration with the rest of the movie's creative team at Pixar, he had to set up expectations for the toys at the beginning that would be disrupted in the inciting incident, as well as becoming the central conflict for the rest of the movie. As such, he revised his writing from scattershot expectations of each individual toy to one central focus on the attic, the safe but otherwise stagnant future for any toy that the inciting incident would interrupt.
You're just setting up that the toys think that they're all going into the attic, right? And they're not happy about it, right? Your character doesn't have to be looking forward to the future, but we have to understand when we meet them exactly what they think their future is going to be because your story is about to disrupt that future.
The reason Arndt's inciting incident as a reverse engineering from the expectations work is because the toys' established expectations of reluctantly being there for Andy as storage were disrupted, their vision being obscured in the trash bag and the noise from outside muffled so they could have no way to reasonably deduce that the attic was where Andy wanted to put them. The unforeseen and visceral event on the level of, if not exceeding the inciting incidents of the first two movies, with a worst case scenario of facing the incinerator being a disruption of expectations through their worst fear. Added by the reluctance of the toys I described to you earlier of living a safe but stagnant life in Andy's attic that Arndt also notes, which just finally reached its major breaking point after the time gap of several years worth of build-up. A display of their fledgling faith in Andy and Woody, also seen in the complete failure that was Operation Playtime, and thus the reason that compels him to abandon Andy and go to daycare before Andy's mom drives off with Molly's box and they lose that chance forever. As opposed to listening to an already biased leader in a position of comfort of his own upon the toys seeing him being chosen for college when they barely escaped the worst possible outcome themselves. It's not that the toys think Woody is a murderer psychopathic as is laughing, but that he's just in denial of the entire situation dumped onto all of them for why he could be denying the reality they perceive. Topped off with how unbreakable loyalty has always been in Woody's character, even more so after the events of the second movie where he almost made the wrong choice of breaking that loyalty to his kid. Everyone acts perfectly within the clear and character-based logic set up so far by not just this movie, but across the entire trilogy. But sure, this is just an attempt to shamelessly rip nostalgia bait from the first movie. YMS then attempts to poke a hole in Mrs. Potato Head's vision of her realizing Andy is looking for them and hence still does care about them.
Couldn't she have been lying just as easily? Why do they trust her and not Woody?
To which I would ask, what could she possibly gain out of lying to the other toys? Her husband's always been the most cynical of the bunch, asserting his jealousy of Woody being the favorite toy and not him, a factor that obviously extends to Mrs. Potato Head, less cynical as she may be. Heck, she was originally teased for Toy Story 2 at the end of the first as Molly's Christmas gift, not Andy's. The obvious compliment female Potato Head to the male one Andy had. In fact, outside the green aliens, she may well be the most understated of the side characters up to this point. Not underwritten, but a character who has the least amount of screen time and hence would not have the level of bias towards Andy that Woody, Buzz, or even Jessie, the main trio, would be reasonably capable of. Hence, she has no reason to lie to the other toys that Andy still does care about them, as she wouldn't gain anything out of returning to Andy that the rest of the ensemble wouldn't already gain.
I am aware that the term plot convenience means nothing to some people, so I'm just gonna bring out my main point right now. Toy Story 3 is a rehash of Toy Story 2.
This is it, folks. The dumbest and most idiotic part of the review YMS tries to shove as a square peg down a round hole. The very one that has dealt irreparable damage to Toy Story 3 discourse, even among fans who like the movie, even citing it as decent, but with lots of alleged structural problems. Ironic, coming from the same person that debunked the notion that Lion King was a shameless, plagiarized version of Kimba the White Lion, and did so correctly and in greater depth across 2.5 hours than this 13-minute trashing of Toy Story 3, I might add.
They follow the formula to an excessive degree. Open up the movie with a large-scale action sequence that is later revealed to be an exaggeration of a game being played by other characters.
Gee, never mind that a video game being played by a toy establishing a greater focus on lore and world building for the sequel, and an entire imagination sequence concocted by Andy himself serving as setup for the ensemble cast, darker tone, and moment of Ultimate 2 to come are two very different things. I would sooner argue that 3 based off his playtime sequence as an upscaled and enhanced accordingly version of 1, so to also serve as a bookend to the trilogy for the first time, but not for the last, except it's not a rehash of 1 for all the reasons I just laid out to you.
Introduce ideas and images reflecting change, and ultimately the idea that toys don't last forever.
Oh yeah, real clever there. He pointed out a blatant ripoff from Toy Story 2's themes of what it means to come to terms with the fact that nobody and nothing can last forever when the time will come, and the value of living with healthy attachments whilst they last, versus Toy Story 3's themes of what it means to confront the exact time head on once you're in it, and how to let go of that attachment. Oh wait, just another idiotic point ignoring the natural progression of the trilogy's themes of how to make a friend, how to keep a friend, and how to let go of a friend.
Unwanted toys are gathered, and a mistake is made wherein one or more of the main characters end up where the unwanted toys are supposed to be.
Sure, like there's not a difference between one unwanted toy being gathered during the prime time for the rest of the toys, and all except one of the toys being gathered as unwanted for the day that they've always feared now being here. Like there's no difference between Woody's identity crisis sparked by his attachment for Andy that causes him to initially refuse going to Japan, only for Stinky Pete to manipulate him into the idea of immortality being greater than attachments that will die out that the prospector never understood, and then Buzz pulling him back out when hitting him hard with the information that there's no greater value in life than the healthy connections you form with people, versus the toys immediately ready to jump ship when they've deemed their attachment to Andy null, also strengthened by their own desire to create many new valuable attachments with other kids year after year, only to realize Lotso's deliberate manipulation of them and his baiting of those valuable connections he understands the value of. On that note of Stinky Pete and Lotso as villains,
Toys get placed in new environment, meeting new characters. One of them being a plump and seemingly kind toy with a deep voice and a cane. This toy is later revealed to be an antagonist fueled by the traumatization of feeling unloved and unwanted, taking their anger out on others.
oh man, totally not a difference between the closed environment of Al's mostly colorless apartment, the only color coming from the obsession of Woody's Roundup nostalgia through memorabilia, serving as a foreboding presence for the dangers of obsessing an immortal reality where such a life detached from healthy connections can lead to an unhealthy obsession for and freeze in time for seemingly eternity, and how that effective yet small setting is frequently intercut with Buzz and the rescue team adventuring through the rest of the Tri-County area, from the toy barn to the airport in search of Woody, versus the daycare setting being the central area for the majority of the movie's time, where color is used with constantly evolving palettes throughout, from the brighter colors of the daycare at day symbolizing a new hope and dawn for the toys, to the blood red sunset highlighting the grim and war-stricken future the toys have unknowingly signed themselves up for, to the dark doom and desaturation of the night as the daycare is suddenly yet substantially transformed from a cheery place of play and long-lasting, constantly evolving connections to the worst physical and psychological hellhole outside of the incinerator itself any toy could ever fear to face. Right down to, as Gaming Magic 13 observed, the prison block shape and aesthetic for the toy baskets doubling as prison cells, complete with the ball and pipe toy thingies doubling as a visualization of barbed wire. And, as I highlighted earlier, Stinky Pete's motivation is rooted in his genuine inability to understand the value of long-lasting connections even when they come to a close, hence his genuine belief that what he's doing for Woody and the Roundup Gang is in their best interest, that immortality reigns far superior to anything stemming from mortality, and even going far as to use that for justifying the extreme measures he took for when reasoning with Woody didn't work. Versus Lotso's knowledge of the value of human connections, his very crushability being rooted in suffering from losing that attachment, lashing out on his friends, and turning Sunnyside into a pyramid where he sits atop, and toys he deems inferior suffer from below, out of the distant hope he offers them that abiding by his dictatorship will eventually allow them to end the suffering of each individual toy. In short, knowingly and deliberately abusing the value of long-lasting connections to satisfy his lust for power of such. A clear path as to the monster Woody could have manifested to in the first movie with as much as one wrong decision. But sure, according to YMS's dishonest, disingenuous analysis of Toy Story 2 and 3, Lotso is a carbon copy of Stinky Pete, all because of a few surface-level similarities with similar, sinister-sounding voices, an accessory they have that doubles as a cane, and that they're both plump, even though Lotso is entirely plush where Stinky Pete is not. And to think that he got away with this crap, considering the 43,000 likes he received on the video? And I could keep going on with the major stretches in logic YMS makes in perpetuating that 3 is a rehash of 2. From the inclusion of the factory setting buzz despite the purpose of 3's inclusion being far more sinister than that of 2's, or the equally sinister inclusion of 3's flashback scenes with Lotso's manifestation into villainy compared to the pure tragedy of 2's with Jesse's human connection being baited only to abruptly come to a close. Not to mention how he's just straight up lies about both owners that Stinky Pete and Lotso end up with having
no care for their well-being.
Though that statement can be said of Lotso as he'll be doomed to slowly rot away for the rest of his days tied to the front of the dump truck, Stinky Pete's new owner is one that will have care for his well-being that he was denied all those years on the dime store shelf. Just not the care that his villainy wanted, but it is care nonetheless. But the problem is, I don't want to, as the fundamental contradiction that lies within his process throughout the entire video is how he goes on to detail criticism for Toy Story 3 being a complete rehash of Toy Story 2, only for him to have asserted that the toys should have refused to believe Mrs. Potato Head and remain non-believers in the truth until the very end, exactly like the first movie. And then he also goes on to suggest that the monkey should have instantly sounded the alarm for Buzz and keep him trapped in a caterpillar room indefinitely, Toy Story 2 style, with a loud noise alerting a higher authority for Woody to remain captive until a leader returns for help. You really can't make this shit up. Truly remarkable stuff from YMS.
Like when they talk about the monkey who's looking at the security cameras, and they put extra emphasis on his ability to see toys trying to escape from the daycare. But Buzz already escaped by this point. Why wasn't he watching the security cameras then? Why didn't we hear any monkey screaming over the intercom?
Why didn't the monkey scream and call for backup in the caterpillar room? Because Buzz escaping to
Go talk to Lotso about moving us to the other room.
is a vastly different situation to the toys escaping, as recounted by the telephone to break out of the daycare altogether. We know that the monkey screaming over the intercom is not the only tactic it has available when watching cameras, as it would have obviously had to be the one responsible for sending Big Baby after Buzz when he escapes to search for Lotso, only to wind up at the daycare's gambling den. Lotso told Buzz literally the scene after Big Baby catches him that he does offer grants to Caterpillar Room inhabitants to move up to the Butterfly Room, but rarely does so, and only to either those who he deems he has physically and mentally broken in enough to have them submitted to his regime, or those who show enough initiative to even escape in helping enforce his dictatorship. Hence why that very scene is punctuated by Lotso resetting Buzz back to his factory settings when he refuses the offer to willingly enforce Lotso's dictatorship and put his friends, scratch that, his family, at great harm. On the other hand, the toys that were trying to escape the daycare altogether did need the monkey to be called in, so to send them to the equivalent of solitary confinement that would also be Anakin Skywalker's worst f***ing nightmare outside of Padme dying, in hopes of further physically and mentally breaking them in for the Caterpillar Room kids to have someone to play with. That way, either they would suffer enough at the hands of them for the rare hope for Lotso to grant them a request, or they would be far too broken for that and face the fiery specter of death that is the incinerator. This alleged plot hole irritates me to no end, and it comes from a gross misunderstanding of the most basic themes of rebellion against authoritarianism and abuse that's the ultimate culmination across the entire trilogy. From what Buzz had to suffer thanks to Woody's obsession for ultimate authority over him, to the manipulation Woody nearly succumbed to as Stinky Pete refused to let him rise beyond an immortal, yet rigid and emotionally stagnant life in the museum, to Lotso's regime being the worst system of abuse our heroes have ever had to face. Next, YMS nitpicks Buzz being set to Spanish mode despite being a major feature of the movie's comedy in order to let up from the otherwise darker tone and aesthetic of the movie and its prison setting. Not only would it make sense as to why Buzz would have a Spanish mode, since America would arguably be the largest market for these many factory-produced Buzz Lightyears on an assembly line, and Spanish is the most common second language spoken across Americans, but his distaste for it basically boils down to, I don't like it. Personally, I thought it was absolutely hilarious and a welcome tone balance for the movie's overall darker, more mature tone out of the entire trilogy. Also, it led to one of the most underrated Pixar couples finally bonding together as they've always absolutely needed to. But I digress.
and then a TV falls on him and he's fine again.
Maybe it's because the blunt head trauma would be, with his helmet on, enough to prevent his softer head from being flattened or cut by the breaking glass, but enough to knock him unconscious and hence serve purpose for rebooting the program system hidden within him. Another nitpick from YMS in attempting to create problems that don't have to exist. It leads to yet another unsupported assertion by YMS. He perpetuates that Spanish Buzz served as a
Racist stereotype.
for the movie just for cheap laughs. Which, allow me to let Gaming Magic 13 speak on this one instead.
Now, again, I don't exactly have the authority to speak on behalf of any native Spanish speakers, as I am not one myself, and I would certainly never want to tell someone they don't have the right to feel the way they do about something of this caliber. However, judging by Leon Critch's track record with Coco, and the extensive amount of research he and his team put into making sure they authentically portrayed Mexican culture in that film,
I absolutely did feel comfortable with the film being lighthearted at times and being irreverent at times, because I knew that ultimately it was very sincere. It was very sincere, and we certainly tried to be as respectful as possible. But at the same time, there was a lot of room to have fun.
I do not genuinely believe for a second that Spanish Buzz was added into this movie with anything less than the utmost respect for the culture they were portraying in Toy Story 3.
As if he didn't nitpick the mechanics of how toys work enough, YMS then goes on to claim that Potato Head's plastic parks can
Animate other objects now?
and that it's a blight on the world building. But no. It's not, because the Potato Head body was never actually animated to begin with. Instead, a shell with appropriately sized holes for the part to be stuck into. A rigid plastic object as opposed to the floppy, less durable object that is the tortilla, which is the animation coming from Potato Head that would be no different than if a human hand were to flop a tortilla around freely.
If you cut holes in Andy and stuck him into Andy, would he be able to control Andy?
No, I don't expect him to be able to control Andy, because there's a pretty big difference between controlling a small object similar to your size of a plastic potato with the limited strength you have versus controlling a whole human and the impossible Herculean effort it would take to move any one of his limbs with wimpy plastic limbs, let alone his whole body. We already went over the point of the plastic potato not being any more animate with the parts than the tortilla is with those same parts. After that, YMS nitpicks Bullseye's already established loyalty to Woody as is mighty seen in the scene where Woody orders him to stay so he won't be left alone in the attic, portraying it as Pixar just saying,
He's a dog now.
Stay.
ultimately irrelevant point on his part. Moving on.
So him and Buzz try to save him. The golf bag is too heavy. Woody takes out a golf club. It lifts him off the ground because it's metal. Buzz uses his weight to bring it back down. And then all three of them use the same golf club to be lifted up to the magnet. Can someone explain to me how the weight of Woody and Buzz is greater than that of Woody, Buzz, and Lotso?
Maybe because there's a major difference between gripping strength onto the club itself, mainly focusing on your wrist and fingers, versus pulley strength for the club so it doesn't zoom up to the magnet, which mainly requires your arm muscles and its joints. And maybe it's the latter strength that Woody and Buzz only released once Lotso grabbed onto Woody, allowing the three to focus on their gripping strength to allow them back to pull all three up. Again, an attempt by YMS to grasp at straws for his nitpicking.
But how did Slinky get down? Isn't he made of metal?
Another desperate attempt to create a plot hole. Note the toys that were next to him upon having found a way to hang on to the overhead magnet. And also note how much greater of a drop it is from the magnet before the shredder versus after the shredder. I believe that in between the time that Buzz jumped down out of the sight of the toys and when they found their way back, the other toys leaped over, grabbed the dangling front half of Slinky by his paws, and used the added weight to pull him down for the magnet, with him now safely out of its reach thanks to the greater vertical distance.
Is it really that emotional to see creepy Andy go, "This is how you must play with your toys because your own imagination is secondary to that of mine as a kid"?
No, Andy clearly was happy to see Bonnie play with her toys passionately and joyfully upon arriving to her address. All he ever asked her to do upon passing down his toys to her was
to take good care of these guys.
Because
they mean a lot to me.
And if YMS is trying to unironically imply that Andy, finally maturing into the parental role that the toys assumed to Andy across the entire trilogy, to give those toys what they gave him in ensuring that they get many years of loving and caring play of another kid as opposed to leaving them to gather dust in the attic, is somehow
creepy
or a sign of him having
mental problems.
Well, I hope he never tries to understand the commitments and values that come with parenting and caring for your own children.
I'll give the movie some credit. They did make some new and interesting characters that they never did anything with.
You mean the characters that not only help Woody locate his way back home to Andy, not only warned him of the dangers that came with Sunnyside, thus compelling him to go back and rescue his family, not only informed him of Lotso's past and thus helping Woody in turning the other toys against their dictator, but also served as the perfect solution to the problem of Andy's growing up and their lack of being played with, that which helps define the crux of not just the ending, not just this movie, but the entire trilogy. New characters they never did anything with. You just made that up. Again.
How about next time you talk to someone about movies, just say, I don't care about the plot, structure, or overall quality of a movie so long as it's marketed towards children.
Are you sure that this isn't a Toy Story 4 review? The one with actual nonsensical plot beats that kick off the story, such as the driveway magically appearing on the left side of Andy's house and Bo Peep's more action hero character as an inexplicable radical shift from our quieter porcelain original trilogy character? The one in which the toys have such little faith in Woody's belief that Forkface will keep Bonnie happy in her kindergarten years that none of them insist upon helping Woody with the simple task of keeping the Super Spork out of the bin, despite Woody's own stubborn refusal. The one that does blatantly rip off plot points from the first and second movies, from the new toy falling out the window to Woody facing insecurities about himself yet again, TS1 style, from an emotionally manipulative character who presents to Woody how great life must be when you're not being loved by a kid, to a large chunk of the movie being centered around rescuing a singular toy held hostage by the main villain, only this time they fail to add any genuine substance of their own at best, with tone-deaf messaging of suicide and abandonment, and completely character assassinate the logical, emotional, and character intelligence of Woody and Buzz at worst. And thus ends an incredibly flawed review, with too little critical thinking having been put in both YMS's writing and his audience's reception to the video. One that only makes a couple decent general observations, mixed in a sea of sewage, stupidity, and to put it simply, downright lies. To end this video on a positive note, I am very much glad that I'm not alone in continuing to give Toy Story 3 the analytical praise it deserves for the masterpiece of animation that it is, and I'm going to be leaving a playlist of good Toy Story 3 videos for you to check out. As I referenced a couple times, Gaming Magic 13's love letter to Toy Story 3 is by far the most in-depth video essay series on the movie I have seen. It is absolutely sublime from start to finish. Do not be intimidated by a 6-hour runtime, for it genuinely makes every moment worth it. Right down to one of the funniest rants I have ever seen in my entire life. My Little Thought Trees video delving into the psychology of letting go that defines Toy Story 3, the culmination of the themes of valuable connections across the entire trilogy, is also a definite recommend, as is Rakotar's essay on why Lotso is one of the darkest, most intimidating, evil, and well-written villains in Pixar's catalog. Also, if you happen to own physical media of the movie, I can't recommend the audio commentaries or other BTS material documenting the making of enough. Listen to interviews from Leon Crick and its team, both old and new. They're the most direct and arguably important source for learning more about the process of how the Pixar movie that was nominated for Best Picture, and honestly should have beaten out The King's Speech, came about as it is. That way, the next time you happen to come across an attempt like YMS's to portray this movie in bad faith, you'll know exactly what to say when asked to give it a watch.
Forget it, guys. He's not worth it.